When the young rancher found them hiding in his barn, 3 Apache sisters, barefoot, frightened, and armed with nothing but pride, he thought they'd slit his throat before sunrise. But when dawn broke, the eldest stepped forward, her eyes dark and unwavering, and said softly. The night was thick with desert heat, the kind that made the earth crack and sigh beneath its own weight. Luke Carver lay half asleep on the porch of his ranch house, hat tilted over his eyes, listening to the wind hum through the dry grass. The moon hung low, painting silver light over the valley and the distant red cliffs that framed his land. For months, the only sounds he'd heard were coyotes, cattle, and the restless creak of the barn door in the wind. Loneliness had become part of the air he breathed, something he no longer noticed, like dust. But that night, something new broke the quiet. A sound too soft to belong to cattle, too deliberate to be the wind, hooves. More than one. Luke sat up fast, instincts sharp. He grabbed the rifle leaning by the door and moved through the shadows. The noise led him toward the barn. The horses inside shifted nervously, picking up on something unseen. He lifted the latch and stepped inside, lantern in one hand, rifle in the other. The faint smell of sweat and dust lingered, stronger than it should have been. He moved toward the stalls, light sweeping across the hay, and froze. 3 figures stood in the far corner. They were young women, their hair long and black, their skin the deep bronze of the southern tribes. Apache. Their clothes were torn, their faces drawn from exhaustion, yet there was nothing fragile about them. They looked like wild things caught between hunger and defiance. The eldest held a knife, the blade shaking slightly in her hand. "Stay away," she said, voice low but firm, her English marked by rough edges. Luke kept his rifle lowered. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said quietly. The youngest, barely 16, took a step back, clutching her sister's arm. The middle one spoke next, her eyes hard. "White men lie, always." He felt the truth in her words sting like heat against the skin. He'd heard what happened to her people, the raids, the burnings, the broken treaties. He couldn't blame them for expecting the worst. Slowly, he set his rifle down on the ground and raised his free hand. "You can see for yourself," he said. "I'm unarmed." The eldest's hand trembled, but she didn't lower the knife. "Why help?" she demanded. Luke hesitated. "Because you're human," he answered simply. That seemed to catch her off guard. Her eyes searched his face for the lie, but found only weariness. Then, with a sudden weakness, she swayed on her feet. Luke took a step forward, and this time she didn't stop him. He reached into his pocket and offered a flask. "Water," he said. She snatched it from him, drank, then passed it to her sisters. The lantern light flickered over their faces, revealing the hollow of their cheeks, the dirt streaking their skin, the quiet strength in their eyes. When they'd finished, he gestured toward the cabin. "There's more inside, food too." They followed him cautiously, knives still in hand. Inside, the small house glowed with the warmth of a dying fire. As they sat at the table, the eldest broke her silence again. "We never touched a white man before," she said, not in fear, but in quiet wonder, as if the moment itself defied the world she knew. Luke looked at her across the firelight. "Then maybe tonight's a start," he said softly. Outside, the night stretched wide and endless, the storm of their lives waiting just beyond the hills. But for the first time in a long while, the rancher's cabin was not empty, and the air between strangers began to shift. The lantern burned low, its golden light trembling across the cabin walls as the night deepened into silence. The 3 sisters huddled near the hearth, still tense, their dark eyes flicking toward every sound that echoed outside. Luke sat across the room, elbows on his knees, pretending to check his rifle but mostly just thinking. It wasn't the first time he'd given shelter to someone in trouble, but this was different. These women weren't fugitives in the way the law would see them. They were survivors, cornered by a world that refused to give them peace. The eldest sister finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "Why do you live alone?" Luke glanced up. "Because it's easier," he said. "People talk too much, and out here, silence don't judge." The youngest, who had said nothing until then, frowned. "Silence makes you forget who you are," she murmured in broken English, her gaze lost in the flames. He didn't know how to answer that. Maybe she was right. He studied them now in the flickering light. The eldest, proud, guarded, eyes like storm clouds that dared him to come closer. The middle one, with a face half-shadowed, sharp and alert. The youngest, barely grown, still clutching a small pouch at her side like it was all she owned. He wanted to ask who they were running from, but something told him not to. When people looked at haunted, the past was better left alone. Instead, he reached for the iron kettle and poured water into a tin cup. "You'll need rest before daylight," he said. "You can take the bed. I'll stay out here." The eldest shook her head. "We sleep together, on the floor." Luke didn't argue. He knew pride when he saw it. He nodded once, leaning back in his chair as they spread out their blankets near the fire. One by one, their eyes grew heavy, their shoulders sinking with exhaustion. Soon, only the soft rhythm of their breathing filled the room. He sat awake for a long while, watching the fire die down to red coals. Something about them stirred a memory he hadn't touched in years, a faint image of his mother teaching him words in a language he'd forgotten, stories about the land before fences and guns. Maybe that's why he hadn't turned them away. Maybe it was the part of him that still believed in mercy, though the world no longer rewarded it. Just before dawn, a faint sound drifted from outside, hooves again, but slower this time. Luke rose instantly, heart steady but alert. He stepped to the window and saw a small group of riders moving along the ridge, silhouetted against the paling sky. He recognized their coats even from here, bounty riders from the next town over. He moved back toward the hearth and crouched beside the eldest sister. "You need to wake up," he whispered. Now, her eyes snapped open, sharp as a blade. "They found us." Luke nodded once. "You tell me what they want, or I can't protect you when they come." The middle sister stirred, sitting up, fear flashing across her face. "They want our blood," she said quietly. "For what we saw." The eldest rose to her feet, her expression hardening into something fierce. "They killed our father. We ran before they could finish the job." Luke's jaw clenched. The world had no shortage of men willing to spill blood for coin. "Then you stay close," he said, loading his rifle. "No one dies here tonight." The youngest sister looked at him, wide-eyed. "You'd fight for us." He met her gaze, his voice calm and resolute. "Ain't about who you are. It's about what's right." The wind outside shifted, carrying the scent of dust and gun oil. The riders were getting closer. Inside that little cabin, three sisters who'd never trusted a white man before now stood behind one, and the sun hadn't even risen on the day that would change all their lives.